I've been traveling the world for a year and a half now, and everyone I meet, when I tell them I'm from Canada, they'll be like, oh my god, I'd love to visit Canada, I've always wanted to go there. And then I start to tell them all the reasons why they shouldn't go to Canada and why I left. So I'm just gonna make this video today about why everyone is leaving Canada, including myself, and some reasons why you should not consider moving there. There's so much I have to say, but I'll try to keep it in under 10 minutes, or I'll just make a part 2. So the first thing to mention is that the cost of living in Canada is truly insane. You're gonna have to spend about half of your salary just on rent. I was spending around $1,500 a month just for my studio, which is considered a pandemic price. But nowadays, if you want to look for a studio, it's probably going to be around $2,000 if you're in a good area. And if you want a 1-bedroom, it's probably going to cost more than $2,500. I did that last summer when I went back to Canada. I rented a 1-bedroom from my friend and they gave me a discount for $2,500. So just to browse on Facebook Marketplace can show you these prices and you can check for yourself. Just looking for a room in a house will cost you around $1,000. So what's the point of a good salary when most of it goes to rent? Toronto came out with a number to be able to live well, you need to earn around $40 an hour to afford a 2-bedroom and $32 per hour to afford a 1-bedroom. But keep in mind the minimum wage in Canada is around $15. So let's work it out. This means you need to be earning around $80,000 a year to live comfortably. And how much does the government tax you on that? So in Ontario, you will have to pay around 29% taxes, and in BC, you will have to pay around 27.9 taxes. How much do you actually earn at the end of the day if you're earning $80,000 a year? You're actually going to be taking home only around $57,000 after you pay the taxes to the government. With the rise of inflation and the cost of goods and the services, I know many people who grew up here now work 2 to 3 jobs just to keep up and to afford all of their living expenses. So from my experience, when the cost of living in a place goes up, the satisfaction with life usually goes down. And I found that for myself, I was constantly stressed about going out to eat. I wasn't really eating out that much and I was just thinking about trying to save money a lot of the times. That can take a toll on your mental health as well. Now that I'm living in Southeast Asia, I eat out pretty much every single day, every single meal, and I don't really think about my money or finances that much, and it's much easier on my mental health as well. The second biggest reason why you shouldn't move to Canada, and a lot of people are finding it difficult there, is the lack of infrastructure. So in Vancouver, which is where I live most of my life, there are only 2 SkyTrain stations, which means that you can really only go to downtown or to Richmond with those 2 SkyTrain stations. To go to anywhere else, you're gonna have to own a car or take a $50 Uber ride. If you've been to Japan or Taiwan, any of these big cities like Tokyo or Taipei, you're gonna see a dramatic difference in terms of the infrastructure. In Taipei and Tokyo, I could go anywhere I want in the city with just changing lines and just getting around with public transport because the system was so developed that there were 10 different lines and you can just get to anywhere you want within 20 to 30 minutes. However, in Vancouver, this is not the case. Even though there are a lot of nice beaches and parks and coastlines to visit, you're gonna have to own a car and drive about an hour or 2 hours just to visit these places because public transportation usually doesn't reach that far. Although there are buses, you're gonna have to spend about 2 hours or like 2 times the amount of time just to get to where you wanna go. And if you do choose to live in downtown, which is a little bit more convenient, you're gonna be surrounded with a lot of homelessness and crazy rent prices. Which brings me to the third point. There is a drug crisis in Canada itself. For example, when I was living in Vancouver, I was living near the Chinatown and downtown East Side area, and whenever you pass by that area, you just kind of feel like it's an apocalypse. There is a fentanyl crisis that's taking over. Just in BC alone, 2,000 people died from drug overdoses last year. If you're sensitive to energy, then you're definitely going to feel the dark vibes even just passing through downtown on a bus, which happens a lot of the times. I didn't even live right in downtown East Side, but I had to take a bus just through that area, and you're going to have to see so many homeless people. It's basically a street filled with tents and everybody's camped out there for long periods of time, and it's even uglier in the winter because the weather is so bad that these people have to barely make it just to survive. Now, when it comes to healthcare, everybody thinks Canada has amazing healthcare once you're a citizen or PR. However, that is not the case. I am a Canadian citizen and I've lived there for over 20 years. However, I still do not have a family doctor because it's extremely hard to find a family doctor nowadays. They're all full or they have waiting lists because everybody's trying to find a family doctor and they're there's less and less of them for some reason. I don't know why, but nowadays when I go back to visit Vancouver, I just go to a walk-in clinic if I need to go see a doctor. And those clinics are always known to have poor service because the doctors there are either new or they're just switching around from clinic to clinic and they don't really know any of their patients that well. Furthermore, if you have a real condition where you really need to see a specialist, the wait times can get up to a year or two just to be able to see the specialist, because there is such a long waiting list for most things these days. So a lot of people who have conditions maybe actually go to the States or to Asia where they can just go to a hospital and see a specialist right away or in a matter of weeks. And the fifth point I want to bring up is that there is a huge brain drain from Canada to the United States and less opportunities as well. So what I mean by that is that a lot of the people who graduated from Canadian universities actually go to the United States because just by going down a few hours south, you can get a 30% increase in your salary. And a lot of my friends who graduated from the same university as me ended up moving to New York or San Francisco to work for big tech companies because you earn way more even if you're working for the same company. I find that there are a lot less opportunities in Canada compared to the United States because there's a lot more companies and startup culture happening in San Francisco and in New York. Comparatively, Canada is not as great of a place to develop your career, which is why a lot of the talented people end up leaving and there is a lack of opportunities and all of the talent end up going to the south of the border. And the last point I want to mention about the downsides of living in Canada is the weather. If you live there for a year or two, you'll realize that it's definitely not great for the weather. If you live in the Pacific West Coast, which is considerably better than all of the rest of the territories, you're still going to get rain for about 9 to 10 months out of the year, and only in June to August you're going to have sunny weather, which is what I prefer. And most of the time I get really affected by the rainy weather. From September to March or April, it's going to be rainy most of the days. So it ends up having a huge impact on my mental health and state of mind. If you want to have good weather, then I don't recommend being in Canada, because even if you decide to live in Toronto, you're going to have a lot of snow and it's going to be really cold, maybe even -30. I think in Calgary last year it was like -30 degrees. And you don't really do much in those weathers, you just kind of stay at home or go to the gym. I also want to bring up another point, which is that if you are a young person, I would not recommend you to go there, move to Canada, because there's just not a lot happening at night or a lot of opportunities to meet other young people. Because even though I've been traveling around the world for a year and a half now, I find that Vancouver is the hardest place for me to make friends. Because people there, is something weird about the culture or something, but people usually stick with their close friends that they've known since high school. So for me, I changed a lot from high school and university, and also after I graduated. So I was looking for new friends that matched my values and mindset. However, it was really hard to find that because most people already have that group. It's harder to have those opportunities just because there's not a lot even happening at night. Most stores close around 6 p.m. So if you go out after 6 p.m., you're not going to be able to find anything much to do. There might be some bars or clubs open, but most people don't really go there. For example, when I was in Thailand just a week ago, I would be able to have a night market just in walking distance wherever I lived. There's probably so many night markets open and there's so many young people there all the time. So it's much easier to socialize and have friends when there are so many infrastructure and activities like that happening around. For example, in Vancouver, there is a night market there, but that night market is only open for 2 months out of the year, and people just go there as like once in a year thing. Whereas in Asia, you can go to a night market every single day. So who would I recommend Canada for? If you have a lot of money already and you're ready to retire and you already have a family and you're ready to settle down, then I think living in Vancouver would be a great option. There's all the basics you need to raise a family and there's great schools there. Because also there's not much to do in terms of nightlife. So if you already have a family, you can just hang out with your family every night and you'll have a lot of time to be able to surround yourself with your loved ones. However, if you're single, then I would not recommend moving there because there's not much to do in terms of nightlife. But what did I do when I was there? Well, I mostly just hang out with friends maybe once a week, go out for dinner. And most of the time I would just come home after work and watch Netflix or TV or just spend time online. or I would go play badminton or some indoor sports because it gets pretty cold in the winter, so it's hard to play sports outside. Another thing to mention is that everything just seems a little bit harder in Canada. For example, just to go play badminton, I would have to find a friend who could give me a ride there, or I would have to pay $30 or $40 just to get an Uber right there. And plus, there's no Grab drivers here like in Asia. So Grab is a system where you can actually book a motorcycle ride for $2 for a 20-minute ride. And it's much easier to get around. Even though I don't ride a motorcycle here, I don't have to spend too much money to be able to get to destinations that I want to go, which is actually very important in terms of quality of life. So who would I not recommend Canada for? If you're just a single person who just graduated from school and you're working full-time, I don't think you'll be able to save enough to buy a house, which is what most people actually want to do. They want to be able to afford a house in Canada or in Vancouver, but now the housing prices are just insane because there's so much foreign investment that's driven up the price of the real estate market. Plus, it's even harder to meet people if you just move here, since everybody in Vancouver just stays in their own social circles. Even as someone who grew up there, I find it hard to find my own tribe, or I'd say Vancouver is one of the hardest places to make friends that I visited. So in conclusion, I've touched on a lot of points about why it's not ideal to live in Canada as a young person and why a lot of people are leaving nowadays. If you have any points to add, feel free to drop them in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.